I was one of 1,983 people lucky enough to make it through the fiasco of the checkout process for the Leatherman Garage 40th anniversary tool, the fifth edition of the Leatherman Garage. And I received it today and had some time to spend with it and kind of check everything out. So I just wanted to give a little overview of it, and I know there are a couple other videos out there that are pretty extensive on this, but I've wanted to point out a few other details and give it some more comparisons to its precursor, the P4, and also talk a little bit about what this means for the Leatherman Arc, which will be kind of what this is a precursor for. So on the outside, it's just kind of a dressed up P4. It's got the cutouts in the sides. It's got this nice bone white Cerakote finish, which is kind of like a baked on powder coat kind of thing, along with the Cerakote finish on the pocket clip and the MagnaCut steel blade. And overall, I say it's a really nice color combination. I don't know if I'm that crazy about the burnt bronze, but it does look good. Being a plier-based tool, the main thing, I guess, on it is going to be the pliers. So opening that up, the first thing you're going to notice if you've had a P4 is the friction and the kind of tension in the handles. So normally the P4 has a lot of slop and play in the handles, and that's something a lot of people like, but to me it's always just felt kind of cheap, especially with how much wiggle there is in them. And that's not something that affects the performance of it at all. When it's locked in, it is nice and tight. I mean, this is the area that really matters, and there's no movement in that at all. It's just in the handles, in this pivot section here on the back, and up here it's got some movement and some play, and it kind of rattles a bit as you're utilizing it. Whereas this one, there's none of that rattling, none of that play. It has a nice bit of friction, kind of more like what you would expect on the Wave, but it's not a spring-based friction that we're used to on the Wave. I'm assuming it's tension in the pivot, and maybe also the little rubber inserts that we've got right in there have some part of that as well. But regardless, it feels really nice. And then we've got this really smooth spring action in the plier head, and unlike a lot of Leatherman tools, this plier head is adjustable. We've only seen that before on another garage, the Dark Side, which is, there's only a few hundred of those out there. So it's nice to have that adjustable plier head, and it's also nice to have this spring in this, it's a subtle amount of spring pressure on this. And I assume if you really didn't like that, you could take this pivot apart and remove the spring. I'm guessing it's just some sort of little clock spring in there that would probably be really easy to remove and put back in. And I think that Leatherman would be crazy to not start incorporating this in their tools in the future. At least the adjustable plier head, if not that, as well as the spring. But the adjustable plier head is a smart move for them because they've got that 25-year warranty. After 25 years, any Leatherman is going to be pretty loose in the plier head if it's been used at all. And I've seen a lot that have been used for 20 years, and I've had some that have been around for close to that long. And within 10 years, they start getting really loose in the plier head. So it's at that point, people are going to start sending them in to get the pliers replaced because they're still covered under warranty and they're not working anymore. The cutters start not lining up right. So they're either letting the customer tighten it up on their own, or when the customer sends it in, they don't have to replace the whole plier head. They can just adjust the tension on those pliers, which is going to be a lot cheaper than replacing them. And so while it may cost a little bit more in the beginning to set it up like this, it makes the experience of the pliers a lot nicer, because a lot of Leathermans from the factory come way too tight, and you've got to go through whatever process to break it in, which sometimes just doesn't happen, and you've got to like add some polishing compound or something in there, or some people will bang on the pivots to loosen them up with a punch or something, which is sucks to do if you've just spent $150 on a tool. So it's nice that these come adjusted from the factory in a way that just feels so buttery smooth like this. The only real difference beyond that with the pliers is the little chamfer grind that they've done right here. And that's just to, make it more visually pleasing. This side has never bothered me on the P series pliers, but I've always found that bump right there to be kind of ugly and obnoxious. So just visually, I think that this is much, much nicer. They've basically just extended the curve here of the back of the pliers out and kind of ground it off to match that follow that line. And they really didn't take any of the meat out of it, so it's not going to be any weaker or anything like that. And then one other minor detail is the grinding finish that they've done on these plier heads it's a little bit rough in comparison to any other Leatherman that I've owned or seen. It just doesn't look like it's been through the same stages of finishing and refinement that most of them do. But that's a minor, very minor detail that doesn't really bother me. So now moving back to the pliers closed position, you'll see there's some scratch marks here already coming off of the Cerakote, which is not, they're not going to be putting this finish on their production tools because it's not the most durable finish, but it does look nice. But you can see it's because where this little bump right here rubs against the frame, it's just going to scrape that off real quickly. In fact, it was like that when I got it. The other place that's going to be like that is this little ramp right here for the plier head. You can see when you close the pliers, the plier head hits that ramp to keep it from passing through to the back side and to basically guide it into place. And so as you close it, it's going to slide up that ramp and basically just scrape that Cerakote finish off. In fact, you can see a little bit of it right there on the surface of the pliers. And as I've been working with this, I can already see some little white flakes on this black surface here. Moving to the outside tools, I think probably because of the Cerakote finish on here, the two handles don't meet quite as flush as they do on the P4. So we've got on this end here what they're now calling the hammering surface, basically. If you compare that to the P4 sits, about a millimeter, half a millimeter closer. Again, not a big issue, but overall there's about a millimeter difference in thickness from this one to this one when you measure this way. Measuring this way, I think that the scales are basically identical. There's no difference there. The second most important feature on this tool is the MagnaCut steel blade. And that's, as most of you will know, kind of a first for the multi-tool worlds. And this is essentially the nicest knife steel that you can get nowadays. Everybody's kind of, it's been the talking point, I guess, for most people about this particular tool. And I've got to say they did a really nice job with the shaping of the blade compared to the P4. I'll get them in here side by side. It's the same length, but they've changed a few details about it. So starting from the back here, you can see the P4 kind of cuts down a bit more. They've added a nice angle here to give, I guess, basically just a bit more access to the blade. Plus it looks a bit nicer. And they've also, I guess, done that to give a little more meat and flat surface where the thumb stud is. Let me pop this out. The original P4 blade just had this cutout for opening, which, you know, it works, but it's not the most comfortable way to open a blade. And I've got to say that the blade action on the P4 has always been a little bit underwhelming to me, and maybe that's just from having an experience of, you know, dedicated pocket knives. Though this one, it feels much smoother to open the blade. I don't know what they've done differently. Maybe they've changed the profile of the grind back here, that kind of cam against the spring. But it does open, I feel, a lot smoother, and I don't think it's just because of that thumb stud. I've added little plastic thumb studs into my P4, and they do help, but it's not anywhere near as nice as this is. So they've tweaked something in there, and also just really refined that profile of the blade, mostly along the back edge. That main cutting edge is pretty much the same, but they've just given a little more character than a gentle sweep on both sides, which I really like. And mine actually came with a really nice grind on it. I assume that they all probably did. From what I've seen, they all have. There's a little bit of a burr on there. You know, it's not going to be as sharp or as smooth as something like a flipper knife on ball bearings that you can just open like that and has kind of a polished edge. But it's pretty sharp from the factory, and it is really smooth for a thumb stud opening knife. The rest of the tools on this side are pretty familiar for anyone that's had the P4 or a P2. You've got the can opener tool, which to me is kind of worthless, but Leatherman keeps it going on pretty much all their tools. They've got the package opener / flathead screwdriver / pry bar now / bottle opener, which they've taken that bottle opener from the Phillips screwdriver on the P4 and combined it into this. And then they've got the awl / reamer tool / mini screwdriver. And I've seen people complain about this awl tool on the free series because it's got that little flat tip to it. And I think Leatherman's done that for a couple of reasons. First one being that they can write that off as an extra tool. So I don't know, they're claiming this has 21 tools. Without that, it would only be 20, which is a bit of a stretch, but you could use that to drive a small screw. And in the P4, that was a little more useful than it is in this, which we'll get to that side of the tool in a second. But I think the other reason that Leatherman puts that little flat screwdriver on there is probably a liability reason, because you open these tools by pushing here with your thumb, and when you do, those pop out, and most of the time they're going to hit you right here in the palm of your hand. And if that was a pointed awl tool, you can bet somebody's going to go like that and stab themselves. Sadly, somebody's going to stab themselves with that. But it would happen, and then, you know, that would look bad on Leatherman. So I think they're kind of covering themselves by making that just a little bit squared off, and it does still really work as an awl. You can definitely punch some holes with it. It works great as a reamer tool. You know, if you're trying to start a screw hole or open up a pipe or something like that, that's like deburr a pipe, the interior diameter of it or something like that, then this tool works really well for that. And this edge is actually quite sharp. But again, it's the bottom side of that edge. You're not going to cut yourself with that one. And I think another thoughtful thing that Leatherman has done with this set of tools is the way that they've organized them, which is different from what we've seen in the P series. And what I mean by that is they go short and kind of rounded to longer and pointed. And the benefit to that, again, is when you open it, the shorter ones are going to be the ones that hit you in the thumb, and the softer ones. So I think if they had switched those, obviously that long one would be poking me a lot more. So it's nice that they're paying attention and putting some thought into those things. Again, we didn't see that as much on this. On this one, the awl is the second tool, and it never bothered me, but I could see it definitely, being an issue for people and just making it a little less comfortable overall. One thing that I've on this can opener, I think that Leatherman is kind of missing an opportunity to do something a little bit different. What I would like to see there maybe is like a gut hook type tool like we've got on the Charge, or like a strap cutter type thing. They could easily keep this a can opener and sharpen that edge a little bit so that you could use it as a pull to cut strap cutter type tool. And I may wind up taking my P4 can opener to the grinder and doing that with this one and swapping that in there. Going over to the other side, oh, we missed one more. We've got the saw on this side, which is Leatherman's standard kind of cutting shape. They tend to be thicker where the teeth are, and then when they move to the back side, the back edge of the saw is thinner, and that means that the saw is less likely to bind up in the wood when you're cutting with it, which is nice. Yeah, that's about it for that. Moving to this side, though, we've got a couple of new tools. We've got the bit drivers. So this is where the P series really lacked. For all of you who have seen them before, this is nothing new, but the P4 basically just had a standard screwdriver, the big flat one here, and then a kind of fixed Phillips. So they've abandoned that fixed Phillips and kept the standard flat driver, but switched over to their proprietary removable interchangeable bit system that you can utilize with their bit kit, which is, I can't believe that they didn't do that from the beginning with their free series of tools. They put all that work into developing a proprietary system like that, then release their, what was their latest and greatest tool, and then leave out something that makes most of their tools, all of their higher end tools, much more utilitarian and adds a lot of functionality to them. Plus gives them a replaceable wear part, because screwdrivers, they wear out over time, and if you wear out the screwdriver on this, then you're just screwed and stuck with a worn out screwdriver. Whereas this one, you can easily swap it out. You can get these for 3 of them for $5 or something like that from Leatherman. I will say that the engagement on here is a little bit different from what we're used to on things like the Wave and the Charge, or the Surge, or any other system. So let me get my Charge out here for comparison. So you can see that it sticks out considerably more. Just flip this around. On their standard bit holder, the bits really seat down in there quite a bit more, by about 3 millimeters or so, and there's some play in there, but it's very secure. It's kind of difficult on a lot of these to pull them out, which I think is a good thing, honestly. And that's maybe one minor drawback, although I really don't see it being an issue on this one, is just that it's a little easy to remove. But it does hold it secure enough for use. It's not just going to fall out on you. And having it stick out a bit more like that, I guess, is a benefit, because it gives you a little more length to work with without needing to utilize the bit driver extender. And they've kind of covered themselves as far as avoiding losing the bit. And that is when you close the tool, when it gets right there, you can see there's a little bent piece of metal from that spacer, and that's just going to keep that bit from coming out. Even if it were to get pushed somehow, it's going to hit that little bent piece of steel and stay put. The other thing that's new for these tools is the micro bit holder, and I really think that that also is maybe a little bit, I mean, it's nice to have that in there, but it's not always useful for everybody, and I think Leatherman could have done something a little bit different. So for a while now, I've been making these little micro screwdriver adapters, which, you know, they just fit into the bit kit and they hold the standard Leatherman micro bits. You know, I'm glad Leatherman hasn't started making these, but it's a little bit of an oversight if you ask me. You could easily, you know, find a way to hold that micro bit into this bit driver and just have it be something that's in the bit kit and not always on hand. But basically the way it works is just an adapter so that this will plug into there, and now you can use that as a, you know, micro bit driver. And I'll leave a link to these in the description below, because there are a lot of Leatherman tools that come with this but don't come with this or one of these micro bit holders. So it is nice to have on there. This is a bit of a big tool to use that little micro bit on, but honestly, a lot of the times that I'll use these little tools is for things other than, you know, adjusting eyeglasses. They work great as like small picks or ways to reach in and push reset buttons and things like that, or just clean things out. So it's nice to have a little tiny scraping tool or something like that. And maybe an easier method for a lot of people is to have an adapter like this so that you can, you know, just use by itself for those little tiny screws, or even just put this into the bit driver extender to drive your screws with that with a little more precision. But moving on, the other really nice feature to have, which is new for the free series, is this file. So the previous file on the free P2 and P4 was kind of a joke. They had a little flat screwdriver on one end, and, you know, it did work. The coarse side, you know, crisscross pattern cut side, and then the singular file cut side, which is less aggressive. They work well for what they are, but size-wise, there's really not much you can do with that other than, you know, maybe filing your fingernails or doing something in a real pinch, whereas this is more of a real tool. You've got the cross-cut pattern, aggressive saw on this side, and then the diamond, or saw, I mean, file on this side, and the diamond file on this side, which is really nice for all kinds of things, more fine work, but also like touching up a knife blade on the fly. And then we've got the, you know, metal file slash saw on this edge here. And the last thing, which is one of my favorite tools from the P4, is the scissors, and they still open the same way with that kind of, you just push with your middle finger to open them up, and then once they're open, you push that to activate the spring. And I've found these scissors to work really well. I like them a lot more than most of the other Leatherman scissors that I've used, definitely more than like the Wave and the Charge. And I think that's largely just because of their accessibility. Having all these tools just, you know, a finger flick away to open them makes them just so much more useful to get out and operate. You know, if you've got to take out, let's say, you've got one hand occupied, or you're holding something that you can't set down, and you want to get the scissors out of your Wave or your Charge, it's not something that's really going to happen. Whereas this is much more user-friendly. Like if you're trying to cut a tag off of somebody's clothing or something like that, you can easily just hold the tag in this hand and get your scissors out. And I think that's pretty much it as far as this tool. So far, I think that this has got to be Leatherman's best tool that they've ever come out with. And as it is a precursor to the Arc, from what we've seen, I think that they're headed in the right direction. A few things that we don't know yet regarding the Arc. They just announced it a week or so ago that it's going to be released in the fall of 2023, so a few more months. We don't know if it's going to have the adjustable or spring loaded pliers. Hopefully it will, because like I was saying, that's a big deal, and it'll save them a lot, I think, in the long run with their warranty. One other mention on the warranty is the knife blade is probably the most common thing that people send their tools in for warranty on. And with this MagnaCut steel, which is a lot more expensive, you can bet that they decided to thicken it up a bit in order to prevent some of those warranty claims. I'm not sure what the breakage resistance or brittleness of the MagnaCut is compared to something like the 420 HC steel on these, but yeah, making it thicker is going to definitely prevent some broken blade warranty claims, especially considering how much more expensive that steel is. But so regarding the Arc, it's not going to have this Cerakoted finish. It is going to have some black kind of patterning on the scales here on the frame, and it is going to have that DLC diamond light coating black on the blade, which is going to be a lot more resilient, although unnecessary. And I think that as far as the name goes, I don't think it's just about it being this kind of overarching sort of arc as in a curve. I think that there's probably some kind of reference there to, the flood of multi-tools that are out there copying Leatherman these days, and hopefully this one will be the one that keeps them going into the future and saves them from being washed out by all the competition and copycats, because they've got their work cut out for them. There's a million copies of Leathermans out there nowadays, and none of them quite hold up to Leatherman's quality standards or warranty standards, but yeah, in order to compete with those, they've really got to set themselves apart in terms of quality and innovation. And I think that this tool really does that. It just oozes quality and refinement and thoughtfulness and attention to detail. And I think that if they keep going with this, if this is their new standard, then they're going to be in a good place for a while. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.